Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just waiting for a little bit to get started until we have everybody on. And I hope you're having a good day. I'm Diane Bailey. I'm the creator of the Open the Door to Tai Chi system. I live in Denver, Colorado, and yes, yesterday was May 21st, and we had about 4 inches of snow. So I hope your Memorial Day is shaping up a little bit better. Well, ours is actually going to be nice too. We're going to have plenty of sunshine. But I'm excited about the webinar today. We're talking about the benefits of barefoot training in Tai Chi. Now, as a lifelong martial artist, training barefoot to me is not all that unusual, but it really is a discussion that we have with not only strength training, but with running, with Tai Chi. This is a question that I get a lot here in my studio as people come in and learn Tai Chi and start Tai Chi from me. They ask me, what kind of shoes should I wear? So we have, I tell everybody that I want them to start Tai Chi with whatever's comfortable with, because I don't want that to be a barrier for them. I want them to feel like, yes, they can start. But I really do, with the underlying principles of rooted and grounded and feeling the energy, it's actually very important for them to get a little less comfort, a little less of that big, heavy tennis shoe. The big, heavy tennis shoe, athletic shoe, is also very grippy. So when we're doing a lot of pivots in Tai Chi, that can be actually pretty dangerous. So I'm really excited about hearing about barefoot training and maybe being able to express more to people about how to do barefoot training and why they should do barefoot training. My guest today is Dr. Emily Splichal. She's a podiatrist, a human movement specialist, and the founder of the Evidence-Based Fitness Academy. I'm going to let her give more of her background, more of her story to you. But I want to tell you just a little bit. When I first saw her, when I didn't actually meet her, it was at the first Functional Aging Summit in Phoenix in 2015. And she got on stage and started talking about barefoot training, and there she was on stage without any shoes on. It was great. It was fascinating to listen to her. And as she did her talk about the benefits of barefoot training, again, as a martial artist, I was more and more interested in this whole idea of, well, maybe it's not just for martial artists. Maybe it is something that's good for our feet, good for our bodies, good for our brains. There's so much information that comes from our feet, and that proprioception, we know that as fitness professionals, that it's important for us to be listening to our feet. So at this point, I'm still waiting for Dr. Emily to log on, and I know that I have just a couple of slides that I was going to share with you for just about what Tai Chi is all about. So I'm going to start that, and then we'll wait till Dr. Emily can get on. And just for those that are not, if you're just being introduced to Tai Chi, Tai Chi is a martial art that utilizes gentle flowing movements to enhance health in the body and the mind. So it is a martial art, and that's part of that allure of barefoot training, but it utilizes gentle flowing movements to enhance health in the body and the mind. There are so many different benefits of Tai Chi, and these are all proven benefits. There have been many, many, many studies about Tai Chi, about it improving balance and flexibility, reducing anxiety and depression, reducing falls in older adults, improving sleep quality, even lowering blood pressure and increasing energy, agility, and overall feelings of well-being. This is all from this gentle form of exercise. As fitness professionals, sometimes we don't think of Tai Chi is being exercised because it is so slow and so gentle. But there's a lot going on when you're doing Tai Chi and learning Tai Chi that benefit reducing falls in older adults, thinking about how your feet can talk to your brain and how that communication is very important to keep you stable and to reduce your risk of falling. Tai Chi, like I said, is slow, very gentle movement. It's all based on relaxation, which again is actually a critical piece of reducing your risk of falling, improving your balance, and it's a great introduction to exercise. So what I know that Dr. Emily is on right now. I want to get her into the room here. Let me get this. I'll stop my share. And there you are, Dr. Emily. Thank you for being on with us today. I'm very excited to have you. I introduced you just a little bit to the group, been talking a little bit about Tai Chi. And so now I'm going to throw that microphone over to you and let you share your screen, let you share your information. We're all very excited to learn about the benefits of barefoot training.
Absolutely. So one, I apologize for being a little bit tardy. I was with a patient, so I apologize. How do I share my screen?
Down at the bottom, if you bring your cursor down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a link that says share.
Oh, yes, the big green button, I see that.
Okay. And when it comes up and then you can hit share, there it is. That's awesome. We can see it.
All right, excellent. Perfect. So thank you to everyone who's tuning in. Thank you for the introduction and allowing me to share with you some of how I approach barefoot science and how some of this information might be able to help your students or your colleagues. My background real quick is that I am a podiatrist. I'm actually more of a functional podiatrist, which is a term that I just kind of coined myself, but it means that I appreciate functional movement, but also functional medicine. So I believe that movement is integrated, but the human body overall from a health perspective, from a mind, body, spirit, physical being, spiritual being, is very interconnected, and we need to carry that appreciation into all of what we do, especially as instructors, doctors, professionals, etc. So that's my background. I practice in New York City, and I travel the world speaking about barefoot science, foot function. I'm the creator of Naboso, which I mentioned a little bit towards the end. And then I've done consulting for top companies, trying to get them to be a little bit more appreciative of natural foot function, foot movement. For today's topic, we're going to be exploring some of the science of barefoot. I know that Tai Chi is a barefoot practice, so many of you probably have a baseline appreciation already for the bare feet, but if some of your members or clients or participants are a little bit resistant against the aspect of getting barefoot, maybe some of this additional information will help them make that transition to being barefoot. So we're going to look at sensory stimulation, intrinsic muscle activation, and then the benefits of grounding and earthing. And I saw that there was a slide with earthing and grounding. So I think that Diane was going to speak about that. Or maybe she was speaking about it, but that's going to be one of the topics as well. So first topic is looking at sensory stimulation of the foot. Now, one of the big things that I encourage people to appreciate is that the skin in the bottom of the foot is different than skin elsewhere in the body. Palms of the hand and bottom of the feet are similar. It's what's called glabrous skin, which means the skin is a little bit thicker. You don't have hair follicles. It has more sweat glands. There's not pigments. You can't tan that skin the same. But really what I want to focus on is the type of nerves that you find in the bottom of the feet, palm of the hand, that you don't find elsewhere in the body. And those nerves play a really important role in how we interact with the ground and interact with really all of our external environment. The relationship between gravity and the ground is critical to optimizing movement, posture, balance, etc. So understanding that is really important. If we look at, the nerves in the bottom of the feet, they're called mechanoreceptors. So they're different than proprioceptors. Sometimes people throw around the term proprioceptors, but they're actually mechanoreceptors or haptic receptors, which means they're touch receptors. You have 4 main touch receptors in the bottom of the feet. You have 2 of them that are slow and 2 of them that are fast. So you're just thinking there's 4, 2 over here, 2 over here. The ones that are slow are constantly reading the environment, which means that as you stand quietly, maybe in, just a quiet feet parallel position, you are relying on the slow nerves that are constantly reading the ground. Whereas the fast ones, they'll respond to a stimulus and then they shut off, which means you have to continuously be stimulating them to create a response. Think movement. Yeah, so you have 2. Now, the first one that is slow is sensitive to texture. So if you're thinking, how can I stimulate the feet? This is what we're going into. You want to stimulate the feet, the first nerve, SA1, with texture. Now, the type of texture that the foot is the most sensitive to is 2-point discrimination. So best analogy is Braille. So if you're looking at Braille, every ATM has Braille on it. So go to the ATM, look at the Braille dots, the 2 points and the distance between those 2 points and the heights of those little dots is very specific to stimulate that SA1 nerve. That SA1 nerve also is the most superficial nerve in the feet or the hands, which means it's the one that is the closest to the surface. Your second mechanoreceptor, slow, is SA2, and it is sensitive to skin stretch. Skin stretch would be if you're on a rough surface and your foot kind of gets stuck to the rough surface versus a smooth surface. That in itself stimulates skin stretch, which is great. Skin stretch, interestingly, also through the SA2, can down-regulate the sympathetic nervous system. I know Tai Chi is a very mindfulness practice, so if you're thinking of all the cool facts that favor it, is stimulating the foot from a skin stretch perspective helps to bring that client or individual into a more parasympathetic restoration phase, which is great. From the fast adapting, FA1, first one, is sensitive to vibration, and then FA2 is also sensitive to vibration. So you have, if we think of the foot and what it's sensitive to, you have texture, skin stretch, and vibration. Okay, so if you're thinking, okay, how can I improve stimulus to the feet? Because the more sensory that comes into the body, the better the motor output. That is a huge belief of mine. You want to ask yourself, how can I integrate texture? How can I integrate skin stretch? And how can I integrate vibration? Or where do I integrate those already without realizing it, and I'm getting this added benefit? Now, where we will actually see vibration is going to be in our day-to-day movements, which I'll talk about in 1 second. So the SA1 receptor, let me just show you this real quick. This is the distribution of all of the nerves. So if you're curious of exactly where on the bottom of the foot these nerves sit, this is where they are. The distribution, again, can help you understand kind of why we're sensitive to these different stimulation. And one thing that I do want to add is that 70% of the nerves in the bottom of the feet are fast adapting, FA1, FA2, so 70%. And if you remember, fast adapting is vibration. So the most important stimulation coming in through your feet is vibration. I'll talk about that again in a little bit. So SA1, an example of a stimulus to the SA1 nerve is the Naboso product line. Totally being out front that I did develop it, but I developed it in a way to enhance barefoot practices. If you have a client who has neuropathy or a medical condition that's neurological, stroke, MS, Parkinson's, decreased sensitivity through their feet, you have to turn the volume up on sensory stimulation in order for them to feel it. Where you might feel the ground fine on a smooth, even soft surface, but not everybody experiences that. So there has to be options available to turn the volume up for some of these individuals, or if you're just trying to optimize your foot and kind of get more bang for your buck, this is a way to be very specific on how much volume or stimulus noise you are bringing in through your feet. So the Naboso mats are something that you could actually do Tai Chi on and bring that stimulation into the foot, which of course enhances any practice. SA2, here I show the example of a massage, but it doesn't have to be just through massage. Massage is obviously skin stretch. Practicing on a rough surface where the foot adheres to it then stimulates skin stretch. So reflexology also stimulates it. If you're familiar with vagal tone and the vagus nerve and the autonomic nervous system and balancing stress responses in the body, reflexology actually down regulates the sympathetic nervous system, just like the SA2 receptor, which is a way to bring a client into a calmer state. Now we're to our FA1, FA2. So this is the one that I said is 70% of the nerves in the bottom of the feet, vibration. Where we experience vibration every single day is in ground reaction forces. So impact forces is perceived by your feet as vibration. So when we walk, I'm in New York, so most of my patients take about 20,000 steps a day. That means those 20,000 steps, they're pounding the pavement, they're hitting the ground, and they are feeling vibrations. The vibration then stimulates the feet, which then tells the body how to absorb impact and use it as energy. Now, why I emphasize that is when you start thinking of shoes, cushion in shoes actually blocks or damps our ability to sense vibration, which is not good because then you don't get information from the ground and from the steps that you're taking. So if there's any clients that are a little bit resistant about getting out of their shoes or moving into a more minimal shoe and they're kind of really stuck to that supportive shoe, think of it as you're creating a barrier between the natural stimulation of the ground that we need and we should be reading and the nervous system, which means they're trying to create movement patterns without all the information. And that's not the point. We need the information to our nervous system to create appropriate responses. Why I emphasize sensory stimulation so much is that sensory stimulation leads to small muscle contractions in our feet. Intrinsic muscles are the small muscles that originate and insert in the bottom of the foot. So those muscles, those intrinsic muscles, have to be engaging with every step that we take. They help to maintain our foot shape. So our arches, our longitudinal arch, our transverse arch, they help us to absorb impact. So the vibration coming in is actually damped by the intrinsic muscles when they contract. So having strong intrinsics is really important. Now, another big thing is that your foot is actually connected to your core. So if you're trying to get into center and find center, you need to be able to get your foot intrinsically to connect to your pelvic floor and your deep core muscles. So intrinsic foot technically equals intrinsic core. A lot of my patients that have pelvic floor issues and they're not breathing the right way also have very disconnected feet with very weak intrinsics. Chronically wearing shoes, supportive shoes and orthotics, can actually lead to atrophy of the intrinsics, denervation, and it creates clearly a much weaker foot.
Can I interrupt you for just a second, Dr. Emily? I just wanted to, what you were just talking about in the Tai Chi Classics, and I do have a slide later about it, it specifically states from the feet, through the legs, to the waist, and expressed through the fingers. And in Tai Chi, we have what we call the Dantian, which is 2 inches in from the belly button and 2 inches down. And this is the center of our energy. It's the center of our balance. And it specifically states we need to be using that energy from the ground, through the feet, up through the Dantian. So that's exactly what you're talking about, is that core integration. And Tai Chi just says it in a different way.
Yeah. I would say a lot of the stuff that I'm saying, probably most of the listeners are like, oh yeah, we believe in that as Tai Chi practitioners. I'm just wording it from a different way. Which
and that's awesome. Yes.
Yeah, which sometimes it's just like, oh, East meets West, or slightly different perspectives that might help you explain it to some of the members or clients that want to hear it in both ways. Or I just find it so fascinating when you find typical Western medicine philosophies blending into Eastern medicine, and they're saying the same thing.
They are.
Yeah, which is great. So looking at some of the research, and again, I'm going to make all of these slides accessible. I will send them to Diane, and then she can send them out to everybody. So you can follow up a little bit more on some of these research studies. But essentially, this is just showing that chronically wearing shoes can start to affect the foot strength and foot shape. The bottom one is the one that I'll emphasize. So it says this study, 2018 study, suggests that the use of conventional modern shoes is associated with weaker intrinsic foot muscles. This may predispose the individual to a reduced foot stiffness and potentially flat feet. So this is looking at the benefits of barefoot training and what it can do to intrinsic foot strength. Again, I'm going to emphasize the one on the bottom here, but I want you to factor in all of them. So the bottom one is showing that wearing Vibram 5 fingers, so this is obviously a minimal shoe. Maybe some of your clients actually do Tai Chi in the 5 fingers, which is a option. If you're wearing 5 fingers or minimal shoes for a period of time, here they were looking for a 6-month period, they saw a significant increase in intrinsic muscle thickness, specifically to the abductor hallucis. Now, this muscle is the muscle that is primarily responsible for our arch, that's great to show that you can actually increase muscle strength, small muscle strength, in the muscle that supports the arch. To me, that sells me to do barefoot training. And then finally, this is just talking, I just wanted to include this, footwear and the aging foot. So if you have some members or clients that are, baby boomer forward size is, I'm sorry, I'm going to be charging my laptop as I do this, is going to be the effects of footwear on the aging foot. So this first one is showing that our foot position awareness is linked to stability. And I'm just charging this so it doesn't die for you all. So it's linked to stability. And what they found is that hard soles provide better stability, where softer shoes, think like thick, soft cushioned shoe, can actually contribute to fall risk in our baby boomers. Second one is looking at foot sensitivity, obviously declines with age, and this is associated with the nerves becoming a little bit weaker, a little bit slower. Footwear, again, footwear can contribute to this loss of foot sensation, which means if you're getting older and you go into thick cushioned shoes, now I'm potentially disconnecting you even more and actually contributing to your loss of stability or fall risk, which is not good. Last one, again, same thing, is trying to balance support of the foot with increased sensory stimulation. Again, other reasons of why I'm so pro barefoot stimulation and reconnecting to the feet. Last one that I'm going to mention has to do with earthing and grounding. And again, I feel like you guys may know a lot of this, and I know Diane wanted to speak of this as well. But some of the anti-aging benefits of earthing and grounding is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with grounding. If you are not, it is a way of stripping away the shoes, getting barefoot, going down into natural surfaces, the dirt, the ground, hiking, the beach, any of those. And what it does is it balances the natural rhythm and the natural charges within the body. The other way that you can think of this is that in our body, inflammation and stress and tissue damage, all of that is acidic or positive in a charge. So if we have too much inflammation in our body and we're stressed, we start to create a lot of positives, which is accelerating to the aging process. It causes disease. Whereas the earth is a negative charge. So we can actually balance out or cancel some of all of the positive charges that are in our body by reconnecting to the earth, getting barefoot, walking on the sand and the grass. And then it is a way to reduce risk of certain diseases or the aging process. Obviously, natural surfaces are the best way to ground: sand, grass, dirt, etc. But you can also ground on concrete, which I think is really cool. So I will ground in Manhattan on the sidewalk when I'm waiting for the light, so the light to change so I can walk across. I'll slip out of my shoes and I'll stand on the concrete barefoot, knowing that I'm getting that grounding effect. Leather, so shoes that have leather bottoms. One big thing is that surfaces that do not allow us to ground is rubbers is the big one. And some plastics, because I think plastic is in some shoes, but rubber for sure. So rubber, which makes up probably 90% of the soles in shoes, is preventing the natural balancing of our charges or our inflammation or our rhythm with the planet because of that barrier with every step that we're taking. So it would be honestly another added benefit of why I would encourage your students, members, clients to do Tai Chi barefoot and to get daily barefoot stimulation is as a way to just reconnect to the earth, get the charges to balance out, but you also start to get your circadian rhythm to match the rhythm of the planet, which is one of my biggest hacks. I travel a ton, way more than I should. And it means that I'm going into continuous different time zones. One of the best ways to beat jet lag and to adapt to a new time zone is to actually ground. and spend some time barefoot outside in that environment, and then you reconnect to their rhythm because it's a different time zone.
That's fascinating for talking about just actually being in contact with the earth. And one of the questions that we got ahead of time is they're asking, can you ground in class? Because we do class inside. I mean, I live in Colorado. There are some chances, obviously, to do Tai Chi outside, but on a regular basis, we need to do it inside. So what you're saying is that might not help us ground. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no. So you could. So I'm just showing the surfaces that. So it depends on the surface that you're on. Concrete is a way to ground. And high rises and gyms and buildings are made with concrete. But then if we look at the ones that do not ground, if you're on wood, then that canceled that ability to do that. A lot of flooring is also rubber. So if you think of commercial gyms and like the weightlifting area is rubber, that's also going to prevent you from grounding. However, there is a little bit of a way around it. There's a couple natural elements that naturally ground. Copper and silver are two of them. So if you wanted to use copper, meaning copper socks have a grounding effect to them. Silver impregnated shoes, which Crocs, not that I condone Crocs, but Crocs had a silver impregnated shoe that was actually used for diabetics, and silver is also antimicrobial and copper is antimicrobial. So there's other benefits to these two elements, but you can actually ground with them. So that's the way that I would kind of sneak in grounding if you did, or in addition to the Tai Chi, find another time that they could actually ground.
Sure. And that's always a fun way to do a different kind of class, is to take people outside. It is a much different experience. Sometimes it's beautiful, sometimes not so beautiful when you have a siren go by or an airplane go overhead and you're trying to scream over that. But sometimes it can be very calming and very centering. You feel that energy, and that's fun to do. We like, my husband and I, when we travel, we like to do Tai Chi outside. There's times when we go to Fort Lauderdale, I'll do it on the beach. And I'm telling you, that's an interesting experience because that sand is shifting. It is not a stable surface at all. So I interrupted you. Go ahead and finish. And then as people get questions, go ahead and write them down, and I will give them to Emily so she can answer your questions.
Yeah, so I was actually transitioning perfectly to see if there were any questions. A couple other things that I will mention with grounding, and then I think you're going to speak about it a little bit, Diane.
Yes.
Is what it does from a skin perfusion. So the circulation benefits are huge. And if you look at some of the research of pre and post grounding and looking at how the blood is circulating to the tips of the toes, it's profound what you can see from doing even just 15 minutes of grounding, of how you start to get circulation all the way to the tips of the toes, which means you get circulation to the tiny little muscles, to the tiny little nerves. All the structures are so small in the bottom of the foot and all the way furthest away from the heart, that grounding is a really easy way to improve circulation to the feet. Thinking if you have someone who might have some sort of medical condition or be a little bit older.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm going to take a couple of questions here, and then we're going to do a little bit. I'm going to talk more about being grounded in Tai Chi, but I want to get these questions because they are very specific to what you were talking about. Jim wants to know, how do the FA1 and FA2 receptors interact with balance?
Ooh, good question. So FA1, FA2, remember, are sensitive to vibration.
Yes.
And we actually use vibration to, one, know how hard we're striking the ground, but two, to maintain dynamic balance when we walk. So you have to be able to perceive vibration to control motor responses, but also to control balance and posture during gait. So it's a huge part of stability. And I'm so glad you asked that question, because I should have mentioned that.
Oh, that's part of obviously one of the biggest benefits of Tai Chi is improving your balance.
Yep.
And I know that that's part of it. We talk about being rooted and grounded, which I'm going to cover in a little bit. It's one of the basic principles. Understanding your substantial and insubstantial, where your weight is. This is all getting that information from your feet. You have to listen to your feet to understand, where's my weight? Are my columns actually in the right place? I have to listen to my feet to know that as well. So this is fascinating, how much information is coming from the feet to help people be balanced. Let's see, Jeremy asked, he said, going back to your list of blockers, substances that block that grounding, and you have wood on there. I'm sorry, I said Jeremy, it's Jenny. She wanted to know why is that a blocker, even though that's a natural surface?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. My guess is it has to do with how it conducts, because remember, this is electricity, right? So water, I just want to emphasize on here that water would accelerate it. So if you walk on the beach and the sand that's wet from the water that's coming in the ocean is going to actually be a faster conduit for the exchange, the electron exchange. I don't want to make it too complicated, but for the electron exchange, where wood would actually block some of it, almost like if you're thinking like electric wiring is wrapped in rubber, like electrical wires are wrapped in rubber or plastic or something that's actually blocking it. The same thing would happen with wood. So I know it's natural, but it's actually blocking the transfer of the electrical charge.
Got it. Okay. We are electrical beings, aren't we? that energy is real.
What I do want to add to that is that the electrical conversation in the body is the fastest conversation versus thinking of any other like muscle contraction. There's calcium that's released and all of everything else that kind of leads to a reaction in the body. The fastest communication is always electric. And it's actually electric charges that are what stimulates your heart to beat. So anything electrical is going to be fast, which means that's why you can see some really good grounding effects quickly in the body, because it's a fast communication style within the body.
And when you're about to fall, you need that fast communication to
100%. Yes. And the fastest responses from preventing a fall are honestly through the skin in the bottom of the feet versus the nerves that are in the ankle, which are more proprioceptors. The speed that they communicate is different. The mechanoreceptors communicate faster. And so that's a really good point that you made.
There's a few questions. Deborah asked it, Richard had asked it ahead of time, and they're related. And Deborah talks about, recommending minimalist shoes, where she switched to them but developed horrible, painful fasciitis. Richard was talking about clients in his class that they have foot issues. He even said club foot. They have special shoes that they need to be wearing. How do you approach that, where even culturally, I have found that people don't want to take off their shoes. They're very connected to their shoes. They they feel like they need their orthotics, maybe they do. How do you approach that with someone?
Yes, so it's hard for me to give a black and white statement on that, or a X equals Y, or everybody should be in minimal shoes, or everybody should be barefoot when they do Tai Chi or whatnot, because there are a lot of exceptions to that. But I would say the people that fall into the exception is obviously the small percent. For those that maybe have had a history of plantar fasciitis or any other foot pain, is a lot of that's actually related to weaker feet. So if you're chronically in shoes and then you get plantar fasciitis, and then your plantar fasciitis goes away, but you chronically stay in shoes, then you kind of start to associate that if I leave the shoe, that I might end up going right back to where I was. And foot pain is not fun. So I could see people being a little bit hesitant or apprehensive to get out of the shoe and do different barefoot stimulation. One, I would say, is to control it, meaning small doses. If they're doing little baby steps into that stimulation or the freedom away from the shoe, then they're slowly building up the strength and they build the confidence in that. What's great is that Tai Chi is not, you are not bouncing off the wall and doing like box jumps. So from a Tai Chi appropriateness with barefoot, I feel every single foot type would benefit from the barefoot stimulation, or from the stimulation of doing Tai Chi barefoot. Once you start adding faster load to the foot, running, jumping, walking, excessive standing, then you can start to see some of the need for orthotics and supportive shoes. But I would put like a good 99% of people should be able to tolerate Tai Chi barefoot and should be doing Tai Chi barefoot, because of the style of the practice and the benefit of the movements that you do throughout Tai Chi are just so built around needing to connect to the feet that it's a really good way to help them restore to their foundation. So if you still have someone who is resistant, I would say maybe have them do a smaller period barefoot, have them release their feet on a golf ball or a lacrosse ball before they do Tai Chi. So they'll release their foot, put their shoe on, and then do the practice, and then start to have them on their own appreciate how they're reconnecting to their foot different now that they're accessing it, even before they practice, just from rolling the feet. And then encourage them, like, maybe we could do, the first few minutes, maybe you could do 5 minutes of balancing on your own barefoot, and they have to come to it on their own.
Yes.
And then typically when they do, they won't go back.
And that's interesting that you said, releasing the foot, because that was one of my questions was, is it beneficial, like, to use a tennis ball to roll your feet on? That's a practice that a lot of people have recommended. And Jim is asking here as well, what about foam rollers? What about that releasing? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So if you do releasing of the feet, and there's some research showing that if you roll the foot on a golf ball, lacrosse ball, trigger point ball, doesn't really matter what you use. I'm not biased to any product, but if you spend 5 minutes releasing the feet, research has shown that you can see an immediate improvement in balance. So I think it's a really good way to prep the foot before a Tai Chi class or practice, or to just say, hey, as part of your lifestyle that I want you to start embracing, let's do 5 minutes releasing the feet in the morning, 5 minutes releasing the feet in the evening. And then when you do Tai Chi with me twice a week, maybe you're experiencing these new sensations from your feet because you're doing this daily practice of foot release, and now it's translating into your Tai Chi.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great advice. That I was telling the group before you got on that when people come in to do Tai Chi in my studio, and this is one of their main questions is, what footwear, what do I have to wear? And I always encourage them to wear whatever they're most comfortable in at first, because I don't want it to be a mental barrier to where, oh, I can't give up my shoes, so therefore I can't do Tai Chi. I don't want that. I want them to come in and experience some Tai Chi. And then, as you're saying, we can start to introduce little by little of using the foot more and releasing it ahead of time, maybe doing the warm-ups without your shoes on. This, I wanted to show you too, and to show the group, these are the Tai Chi shoes that we also use. They have a cotton bottom here. There's no support in them. They're just little slippers. But it is a good intermediary, I think, and from what I'm listening to what you're saying, is it is a good intermediate step, I should say, from that big grippy tennis shoe to something like this, where at least they feel, maybe even mentally, I still have something protecting my foot, and yet it is giving them more information, and it is causing their foot to work harder than in the big tennis shoe as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good intermediary step, like what you were saying, because there are going to be some people that just refuse to be barefoot, and you can guide them, like you can take them to the water, but you can't make them drink it. So right. You can guide them the best that you can and try to find what gets them the closest to the ideal situation, and then have them just continue to explore that aspect of Tai Chi. And then they may, on their own, start to appreciate different areas, and then you just keep encouraging them and keep the conversation, and maybe if they get used to that, one day they want to try it and go totally barefoot, and then they'll feel the difference. Anyone who has any concerns on like foot cleanliness, which I often get asked a lot as well, yes, is I would never use that as a reason to not be barefoot, especially with like Tai Chi or yoga or Pilates or anything like that, is that one, funguses and viruses or bacteria or anything of what you're concerned of from a cleanliness perspective typically don't live on the dry surface of where you're doing Tai Chi. It would be more like in the gym shower, so where it's wet. And then if you go into shoes, like socks and shoes, and you're sweating in your socks and your shoes because you're staying in your shoe all the time, that's actually where you see, those are the environments where you see the funguses and the bacteria and the things that people are concerned of. A dry surface, you really won't see it. And then just say, practice good hygiene, clean your feet after. What's kind of funny is that like yoga studios are barefoot, and I'd say 95% of people are probably barefoot in yoga. Some will wear the little grippy socks, but there's like no question about being barefoot. People just take their shoes off and they're barefoot. Yeah. And then depending where you're doing Tai Chi or taking Tai Chi, if it's a little bit more commercial type setting, then suddenly people start to question the normality or the cleanliness of being barefoot. And it's always kind of entertained me.
Well, and that is interesting. As I was telling the group ahead of time too, is as a lifelong martial artist, that we go into the gym, we take our shoes off. We practice barefoot. And when I first saw you, which was at the FAI summit, the very first one, and what you were saying made so much sense to me, because that's how we work. There's one more question about surface that Jenny wanted to know, and then I'm going to change the screen to show some of those Tai Chi slides. But if Jenny asked, what about asphalt as a blocker?
Yes, that's a really good question. I would have to get back to her on that. Of what I've read, yes, because now you have a mix of different materials that are going into the asphalt. I know for sure that the concrete, like the sidewalk concrete, is a conduit to the grounding effect. The asphalt, because of the other elements in it, I would honestly have to check, and I don't want to say anything that misguides. So I apologize.
No, that's totally great, because Jenny, we will be able to get to you. I'll give that information to Dr. Emily, how she can just get that information to you directly. We may include it in just a follow-up email to the group as well. So don't worry about that. Let me show you that slide that you were mentioning of being rooted and grounded in Tai Chi. This is a basic principle in Tai Chi. Now, as you said, we're not jumping off the walls. It's very gentle, calm movements. And we need to think about being rooted and grounded, making sure that we're stable and in firm contact with the ground. You might think, well, I don't float, but a lot of people don't have that mind-body connection of actually being stable and in firm contact. This is from Dr. Yang Jun Ming's book, Tai Chi Chuan Classical Yang Style. He also says to root your body, you must imitate a tree and grow an invisible root under your feet. And he goes on, it's not a root that makes you stuck. It's a moving entity where as you move, your roots move as well. And he says after you've gained your root, you must learn how to keep your center. And you were talking about that as well, where it comes from the feet. The center and the feet are connected. Your root is made up of your body sinking, centering, and balance. And rooting not only includes rooting the body, but it's also related to the actual movement, which is found in its purpose or principle, which means you have to understand why you're doing what you're doing in Tai Chi. That's part of being rooted and grounded. Also in the Tai Chi Classics, this is the one that I mentioned earlier, Dr. Emily, where upper and lower follow one another. We're rooted in the feet, issued by the legs, governed by the waist, and expressed in the fingers. From the feet to the legs, then to the waist, which is our dantian, always there must be complete integration. So this is, and I talked earlier about distinguishing insubstantial and substantial. And without that discernment of empty and full, the classics talk about your steps being sluggish and heavy and the stance unsteady. All of that information from the feet is helping you be more balanced, helping you move with better ease, and even if I can say with more grace. That's part of Tai Chi movement as well. And that's why I was so excited to talk to you today, because as I talk to my students, sometimes they just don't understand how their movement is really helping them. And it translates to real life. It translates to being more balanced. It translates to being more centered. And as you said, this helps actually the whole integration of the body, even down to the breathing. And I know that on your website, Dr. Emily, you talk about breathing being integrated into the whole movement that you talk about. Can you mention just a little bit about how breathing affects this as well?
Yeah, so I look at breathing, or I'll mention breathing from the Western way first, which is through how our feet connect to our center being pelvic floor and diaphragm, through different fascial lines. So different fascial lines in the body. If anyone is familiar with Thomas Myers and anatomy trains, it's essentially how one muscle blends into another muscle, and that integration is innate into the human body, musculoskeletally, physiologically, spiritually, every way. But from this fascial line perspective, the muscles in the bottom of the feet actually are continuous with your adductors, so your inner thigh, which is then continuous with your deep rotators of the hip into your pelvic floor, and then your pelvic floor blends into your diaphragm. And then obviously the diaphragm is kind of playing around with how we breathe. So if you're not breathing the right way, that starts to affect your diaphragm function and stability, which then affects your pelvic floor stability and coordination, and they really should be in harmony with each other. So I try to use the breath to coordinate the deeper core, especially from a restoration perspective or a injury rehab perspective, that those have to be in rhythm with each other. And then because the feet connect to the pelvic floor, you can use specific foot activation and foot contractions to then further optimize the pelvic floor and the diaphragm. So any cue that I give to a foot engagement has to be timed with how they're breathing. You're not just kind of like engage the foot and then hoping the core will fall into rhythm. There has to be a conscious cueing around that. And then that builds faster, coordinated stabilization from the ground up for the individual. So that's how I use it primarily.
And we in Tai Chi, there are different levels of learning, and regulating the body, learning what the movements are, learning where your feet go, where your hands go, understanding how to be a little bit more rooted and grounded, or distinguishing substantial and insubstantial. That's called regulating the body. And the next level up is regulating the breathing. And that's an important piece. They have to understand how to move first, but then to add that layer of breathing is actually very difficult for people. But we want it to be, as you say, in rhythm. And that whole coordination of the body and the movements and the breathing is part of what Tai Chi is all about as well. So I find it fascinating that, as you're talking about, you think of just the foot, it's actually important. Breathing comes into it. It's not just your foot. It's not just about being barefoot. All of this is integrating together. The piece about Tai Chi that a lot of people don't, and I think maybe you find this sometimes too, is there's a misunderstanding of, your feet are actually very important. We neglect our feet in a lot of ways. But the thing about Tai Chi that a lot of people find is it's unapproachable. They feel like it's too hard, or they feel like it's too woo-woo, or I don't want to be a martial artist. And what I want to encourage people is this is a perfect form of exercise that is not only going to help your whole body in coordination, in balance, but it's going to help you with everything else to translate to the rest of your life. Talking about being grounded, taking your shoes off. Maybe it's more comfortable in a Tai Chi class. Maybe you feel a little bit less intimidated to do it in class because it is a martial art, because there are other people in class that are barefoot. Maybe it makes it easier for you, which is going to help you outside in the world as well through all the things that Dr. Emily has been talking about. I want to encourage you that you can learn Tai Chi, and you can learn to teach it. It's not that difficult. The Open the Door to Tai Chi system is a very methodical way, very easy way to learn. I teach you the history, I teach you the movements. I don't want you to be intimidated. I want you to be able to incorporate this form of exercise into what you're doing. And then if you really do want to teach, I teach you how to teach. And so that's not intimidating either. I teach you how to incorporate these underlying principles, which is really the important piece of Tai Chi, being rooted and grounded. It's not just the movements that's important. It's understanding how to be rooted and grounded, how to incorporate your substantial and insubstantial, and how to breathe. We have a membership group with the Tai Chi program that helps you once you start to learn Tai Chi and once you start to teach it, because I don't want you to be alone. This is a community thing, and that's an important part of it. If you're a fitness professional, it does provide some continuing education credits. And this is something, Dr. Emily, for your clientele as well, that if they just want to learn a little bit of Tai Chi in the comfort of their own home, we have the daily series. These are shorter forms. These are streaming videos that you can watch at home and learn those underlying principles and just learn a little bit of Tai Chi and maybe think, okay, I might be able to go to a class after I learn just a little bit about it. If you're interested in either the certification program or that daily series, I do have a special for you. The code is webinar25 and it is all caps. So if you put that in the code, make sure it's all caps. And my contact information here is diane@taichisystem.com. I know that Dr. Emily had her slide up with contact information, and we will send out a replay. We'll send out all these slides so that you guys can have that if there are further questions for either Dr. Emily or myself, that you can get in touch with us. I know that we live in a society now where email seems a little bit cumbersome. Never thought we'd hear that. But it is important. If you have a question, please email us. Please let us be able to answer those questions. If you just want to try a little bit of Tai Chi for yourself, there is a little mini course. It's a 10-minute mini course. You can try that, and that's just for free. It's at taichisystem.com. And there are a couple other questions, Dr. Emily, I just want to go through. One more question from Jenny. She's very concerned with this surface. Would being barefoot, even if you have painted concrete, vinyl, and carpet, be better than sneakers?
Meaning, like, which is the worst of the two evils?
Right, yes.
What I would say is if you don't think that you're getting the ideal grounding because there might be carpet on the concrete or these other barriers to true grounding, then I would say instead of having, hopefully this is grounding, let me either for sure go outside barefoot where you know is true grounding, or there are grounding mats. So you could use not an artificial surface, but use products that are developed to enhance grounding. And any of the blankets and the mats and the pads that you can buy online for grounding are trying to make grounding a reality in, let's say, like an urban setting, which are great. They're not ideal because you don't get the rhythm of the planet by doing those. Do you ground the positive charges in the body? Yes, but I mean, the other aspect to grounding and earthing is that you're literally outside in the sun with the being of the planets, and that you can't compare to a grounding mat in your apartment.
Right.
So it's two sides to it, and I try to make grounding not too medicalized, or I feel like some of the grounding mats and pads make it too medicalized versus the mind-body side. And I feel like, especially with Tai Chi, that the whole being is a little bit more true to how I would achieve grounding.
Yes. And also when you were talking about, that the vibration and your mats, the Naboso mats, and that can be a stimulation as well, is having that with your feet. If you're indoors, that can increase that communication, correct?
Yes, it doesn't ground, not yet. We're looking to add copper to our products so that we can add some of the grounding, but it's okay I think to know that a certain environment or situation, you're like, okay, I'm going to use the Naboso mat barefoot to focus on my sensory side. And then I'm also going to integrate barefoot on the grass to get the benefit of the grounding. So versus trying to get it all into one session and one product or situation, I think trying not to do that, but find like, okay, this will be focused on sensory, this will be focused on grounding, this will be focused on, right? And
That's
then
great.
do it that way.
That helps. Yes, that helps a lot. I really appreciate you taking the time today, Dr. Emily. This has been so informative. And like I said, this is a question that I get a lot with my people that come into Tai Chi in my studio. What do I wear? What kind of footwear? What am I? Because there's this big interest in what I'm supposed to be like the videos on YouTube where they have the silk pajamas and they're barefoot. But I want to say thank you again, and I want to tell a story that I think you'll find cute as well. I had a client come in once that he was 82 years old and he's an avid tennis player, and he looked at me straight in the eye and he said, "Diane, I think my feet need hearing aids." And I said, "Oh, really? Why do you think that?" And he goes, "Well, I tell them to be faster and they just don't hear me." So I think he got the idea very definitely that his feet were trying to talk to him, or at least he was trying to talk to his feet, and they weren't really responding. But it is an important thing for all of us to be aware of our feet, to be aware of what we're doing with our feet, how we're clothing our feet, how we're using our feet. And I appreciate your expertise and your willingness to be able to do this with us today. So thank you everybody for coming. Please know we will send out a replay. You will have these slides, so you will have our contact information. If you have any additional questions, we will be glad to get back to you. I hope you have a great Memorial Day weekend. We'll talk to you later.